March 11, 1945, Okinawa, Japan. The wind rolled across the grey shoreline in low, moaning breaths that carried the scent of cordite and rotting seawater. Waves slapped rhythmically against the black volcanic rock, but nothing about this beach felt alive. It felt like a place where men were meant to vanish. That morning, Private First Class Elias Ward, a thin, pale rifleman from the 77th Infantry Division, stepped off the landing craft with trembling hands that he tried, unsuccessfully, to hide inside his gloves. He was not a man anyone expected anything from. Ward had arrived in theatre only weeks before, already marked by the whispers that followed him, too quiet, too slow, too hesitant. Men said he froze during live fire. Others joked he should have been a clerk, or a cook, or anything that didn't involve holding a rifle. Whenever he passed by his squad, their conversations thinned. Their glances slid away. No one hated him. They simply did not believe he mattered. That morning, while men prepped their gear and checked their weapons with the alert focus of the combat seasoned, Ward fought to steady a rifle that shook even when he tried to hold it against his chest. Sergeant Garrison glanced at him once, an expression caught somewhere between pity and annoyance, before telling another soldier, not quietly enough, that he hoped Ward wouldn't slow the team down when they moved to clear the eastern ridge. The mission was supposed to be simple. Secure a small stretch of beachhead, sweep the dunes for Japanese machine gun nests, then link with the armor moving inland. The kind of mission that looked straightforward on a map and turned into hell once boots hit real ground. The squad gathered, 7 men crouched behind fractured coral boulders while surf hissed behind them. Garrison muttered instructions. Nobody looked at Ward. Then a burst of distant artillery cracked the sky open. It began with a single shell landing too close in the sand behind them, a plume of grit blasting upward like a geyser. Men flinched. Ward nearly dropped his rifle. A second shell detonated farther up the ridge. Then came a stuttering chorus of Nambu machine gun fire echoing down from the camouflaged hills rising above the shoreline. In the space of 3 seconds, the entire coastline erupted with muzzle flashes blinking behind the brush. The squad scattered, diving for the nearest cover. Ward followed, stumbling, heart hammering so hard he could barely hear the gunfire over the blood rushing inside his skull. The Japanese had been waiting, buried positions, interlocking fields of fire, trenches cut deep into the hillside. It was a perfect kill zone, and the Americans had walked straight into its teeth. Tracer rounds sliced the air in glowing arcs. Garrison shouted orders lost beneath the roar. One soldier dropped instantly, hit clean through the neck. Another screamed as shrapnel tore into his thigh. Ward pressed himself into a narrow cut of sand behind a rock, hands shaking so violently he could barely reload. He saw movement in the brush above, a flash of a helmet, then another. The enemy had numbers. They had elevation. They had complete control of the beach. The squad tried to retreat, but every path back toward the landing craft was raked with machine gun fire. Waves exploded upward with each round that slammed into the water. Men tried crawling. One ran and made it 3 steps before collapsing face first. And slowly, brutally, the squad was torn apart. Ward watched, frozen. Not by fear, though fear was there, thick enough to suffocate, but by something worse, the horrifying clarity that he was suddenly alone. Completely alone. One by one, the others went silent. Garrison fell last, still trying to drag another wounded soldier when a machine gun burst shredded the sand around them and dropped them both. When the smoke settled, Ward realized the beach had gone eerily quiet. The kind of quiet that only existed once all the living knew better than to move. He crawled toward a dune, rifle clutched tight, lungs heaving as he forced himself to stay low. He checked his ammunition. 2 magazines. 1 partially loaded. That was all. No squad. No backup. No radio. No chance of rescue until the next wave of Marines landed, and they were delayed by hours. The Japanese troops on the ridge began shifting position, boots crunching softly over dry brush. Ward saw them through the drifting smoke, silhouettes moving with the confidence of men who believed every American on the beach had been eliminated. They were coming down to confirm the kills. And he was still there. His breaths came shallow and rapid, echoing inside his helmet like distant thunder. He pressed himself deeper into the shadows of the dune as the enemy moved closer. If he even twitched, they would spot him. If he stayed still, they might pass him by. Or they might not. A lone soldier, underestimated by his own, now trapped behind enemy lines with almost no ammunition and an entire Japanese search party closing in on him. Then Ward heard the crunch of footsteps stopping just meters away. Someone was standing directly above his hiding spot. The sand shifted. A shadow fell over him. And when the soldier stepped forward, Ward realized he had only seconds before he was discovered. The Japanese soldier paused at the crest of the dune, his boots grinding softly into the sand as he leaned forward to scan the beach below. Ward felt each grain slide, heard every faint vibration through the earth beneath his body. The soldier's silhouette stretched long over him, just close enough that one shift, one careless breath, would expose him. Ward's heart pounded so violently he could feel it shaking his rifle. Sweat pooled inside his gloves despite the coastal wind cutting across the beach like a cold blade. The soldier took one step closer. Then another. Ward could see the bayonet fixed to the Arisaka rifle, the metal catching a sliver of sunlight as the man adjusted his grip. Another soldier appeared behind him, then a third, their voices low murmurs carried on the sea breeze. They were discussing the bodies, counting them, confirming kills. One of the voices drifted nearer, steady, confident. They believed the fight was over. Ward knew he had seconds before their eyes swept the dune and found him. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but any movement would be suicide. So he stayed still, so still that the wind seemed to move more than he did. Slowly, agonizingly slow, he pressed his body deeper into the shallow depression carved by the earlier blast. He pulled a handful of wet sand over part of his helmet, giving it the mottled texture of debris. The first soldier turned. His foot slid down the slope, sending a thin trickle of sand spilling inches from Ward's face. Another step and Ward would be staring directly into the muzzle of a rifle. But then a sharp whistle cut through the air from somewhere up the hill. A call. A signal. The three soldiers stiffened, exchanged quick nods, and began moving back up toward their positions. Ward didn't dare to breathe until their silhouettes disappeared behind the brush. When he finally exhaled, the breath left him ragged. The beach, once a place of roaring chaos, returned briefly to silence, deep, hollow, unnatural. Smoke curled from shattered driftwood. Spent casings glinted faintly in the sand like scattered fragments of a broken mirror. And Ward, still shaking, realized his survival depended on vanishing completely. He crawled along the backside of the dune on his stomach, dragging his rifle by the sling, keeping his profile low. Each movement was deliberate. Slow. Controlled. The enemy was still watching the shoreline. He could sense them in the ridges above, listening for anything, a cough, a misstep, the mechanical click of a bolt. Ward studied the terrain ahead. Jagged coral rock formations jutted from the sand like the ribs of some ancient, dead creature. Beyond them, a narrow crevice wound inland. Small enough that a man could hide. Small enough that patrols might overlook. But reaching it meant crossing 30 yards of open beach. 30 yards. No cover. No concealment. Ward took a breath, tasting salt and gunpowder. Then he moved. He sprinted low, legs pumping through the loose sand that shifted beneath every step. The world shrank to the thump of his boots and the wheeze of his chest. He expected gunfire. Expected a shout. Expected the hiss of a bullet splitting the air. But none came. He dove behind the coral formation and slid into the crevice. It swallowed him in darkness, the walls cold and narrow. Perfect. Temporary safety. He listened for any reaction from the ridge, boots running, rifles loading, shouts in Japanese, but heard only the distant crash of the ocean and the faint metallic clatter of someone adjusting a machine gun position. Night would fall in hours. He had to survive until then. Ward crouched deeper into the rock's natural maze. The crevice widened slightly, forming a hollow just large enough for a man to sit. He checked his ammunition again. 2 full magazines. 1 partial. 77 rounds total. Not enough to confront anyone. Barely enough to defend himself. A shadow passed overhead. Then another. Enemy patrol. Their footsteps crunched over the coral, slow, intentional, sweeping patterns designed to flush out any stragglers. Ward held his breath until his vision blurred. One of the soldiers lingered directly above his hiding place, the weight of his boots sending dust raining down into Ward's eyes. Ward resisted the urge to blink. He resisted everything, movement, sound, thought. Minutes crawled past like hours. When the patrol finally moved on, Ward slumped back against a stone, feeling the tremor in his limbs. Every muscle ached from tension. But he was alive. He waited until dusk. Wind howled across the beach as the sun bled into the horizon, turning the sky a deep rust red. Shadows stretched long and sharp, giving Ward the cover he needed. He slipped from the crevice and moved inland, using every fold of terrain to hide his approach. He avoided open sand, sticking to low ground and jagged coral that masked his silhouette. He had no plan. No extraction route. No allies. But the ridge above the beach held fortified Japanese positions, and if he stayed anywhere near them, he was dead. He needed higher ground. He needed to see the battlefield. He needed to survive the night. The jungle beyond the beach loomed dark and dense, a wall of twisted roots and dripping foliage. Ward approached it like a man stepping into the throat of something alive. Every branch creaked. Every leaf whispered. Night insects chirped in jittery rhythms that made his nerves vibrate. But the forest offered something the beach could not: concealment. He moved through the undergrowth on silent feet, sweeping aside vines with the muzzle of his rifle. His breathing came slow and controlled now. He was learning the rhythm of survival, how to disappear, how to wait, how to listen. Then he heard it. A faint rustling. Not wind. Not insects. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Closing in behind him. Ward froze. The darkness shifted, and a silhouette moved between the trees, then another. Japanese scouts, sweeping the jungle. Closing in on his exact position. And when one of them raised a lantern to scan the underbrush, its beam stopped directly on Ward's boots. The lantern light froze on Ward's boots, illuminating the dirt caked on his laces and the thin strand of torn fabric hanging from his pant leg. For a heartbeat, no one moved, not Ward, not the Japanese scout holding the lantern, not the two silhouettes flanking him. The jungle's thick humidity made everything feel suspended in place, as if time itself hesitated. Ward's breath thinned until it almost disappeared. He shifted his foot an inch deeper into the foliage, but the scout had already seen enough. The man stepped forward, raising his rifle. The lantern's trembling glow cast warped shadows across the trees, sharpening the tension to a razor edge. Ward didn't think. Instinct snapped through him. He threw himself flat against the jungle floor as the scout shouted, the sound cutting through the darkness like a blade. A muzzle flash erupted, blinding white for an instant. The bullet skimmed past Ward's shoulder and punched into a tree trunk with a dull thud. He fired back once. Just once. A controlled, desperate shot. The round struck the lantern, shattering the glass in a brief explosion of sparks and oil. Darkness collapsed around them instantly. Shouts erupted. Boots crashed through the undergrowth. Branches whipped. Ward rolled into a thicket of ferns, using the sudden blindness to his advantage. The scouts fired wildly, muzzle flashes popping in staccato bursts that illuminated fragments of their faces, anger, confusion, and the growing realization that the American they thought dead was still fighting. Ward crawled through the brush on his elbows, pushing deeper into the forest with the cold precision of a hunted animal. His chest scraped against roots. His rifle dug into his ribs. Every movement threatened to snap a branch. But the darkness was his shield now, and he used it ruthlessly. The scouts searched. One passed so close Ward could smell the tobacco on his uniform. Another swept his bayonet through a cluster of leaves just inches above Ward's head. But they didn't fire. They didn't shout. They were listening. So Ward made himself part of the earth. He pressed his cheek into the soil, steadying his heartbeat. The patrol lingered for minutes that felt like hours, then drifted deeper into the trees, their footsteps fading into the jungle's endless murmur. Ward waited long after they left. 30 seconds. 60. 90. When he finally rose, every muscle shook, both from adrenaline and from the realization that the enemy would not stop now. They knew someone was alive. Someone capable. Someone they had failed to eliminate. He moved deeper into the forest, navigating by fragments of moonlight filtering through the canopy. Each step felt like wading through a living maze. Vines clung to his gear. Roots tried to trip him. The humid air pressed on his lungs, turning every breath into a struggle. But he kept going. By midnight, he reached higher ground, a ridge overlooking the beach he'd once landed on. And when he saw it from above, his stomach clenched. Japanese troops were swarming the shoreline. Dozens of them. Patrols sweeping every inch. Officers shouting orders. Engineers setting up new machine gun nests aimed directly at the water. They were fortifying the entire coast in preparation for another American landing wave. And Ward, the soldier no one trusted, no one believed in, was the only living American who knew. If he didn't act, the entire landing force would be slaughtered before they even reached the sand. Ward scanned the area, assessing the terrain. The ridge was lined with old defensive trenches, abandoned, half-collapsed, but still navigable. Below them, a fortified bunker sat carved into the rock, its firing slit pointed toward the sea. A heavy machine gun resided inside. If Ward could get to it, if he could take it, he could hold the beach, draw fire, disrupt their positions, buy time. He knew how insane that thought was. One man, one rifle with barely 60 rounds left, against an entire company preparing for a coastal assault. But he also knew this: he couldn't let the Americans walk into a killing field. He approached the trench, staying low. Distant thunder rumbled, not the sky, but artillery repositioning. Radio static crackled faintly from a Japanese field set below. Wind hissed over the rocks like whispered warnings. Ward crawled into the trench and followed it until he reached the bunker. 2 guards stood outside, rifles slung, talking quietly. Ward's pulse pounded like a drum against his ribs. He waited for the wind to rise, for the rustle of the forest to cover his movement. When it did, he advanced. One guard turned his head. Ward slipped behind him and struck with the butt of his rifle, silent, brutal, precise. The man crumpled. The other spun, drawing breath to shout, but Ward shoved him into the trench wall and silenced him just as quickly. His hands trembled afterward, not with fear now, but with something colder. He entered the bunker. The machine gun sat on a sandbag mount, its ammunition belt coiled like a metal serpent. Ward slid behind it. The firing slit offered a perfect view of the entire shoreline and the sea beyond. Moonlight shimmered on the waves. In the distance, a faint silhouette of American landing craft approached, earlier than expected. The Japanese were already reacting. Officers barked orders. Machine gunners took positions. The first mortar team lifted around. Ward steadied his breathing. His hands hovered over the weapon. He knew that once he opened fire, they would find him. They would come. They would destroy the bunker. They would kill him. But every second he hesitated meant another American would die on the sand. He pulled the charging handle. Metal clanked. Footsteps suddenly echoed outside the bunker. Someone had heard. A shadow moved past the firing slit. Then another. And as Ward gripped the machine gun, preparing to fire the first shot, he heard multiple boots rushing straight toward the bunker entrance. Boots thundered toward the bunker entrance, fast and coordinated. Ward swung the machine gun toward the shoreline, knowing he had only seconds before the Japanese stormed inside and cut him down. He braced the weapon, his breath sharp and controlled, the cold air scraping his throat as he inhaled. He fired. The machine gun erupted with a violent, metallic roar that shattered the quiet of the pre-dawn hour. The recoil slammed against his shoulder like a hammer. Tracer rounds streaked across the beach in white-hot lines, cutting through the Japanese mortar team just as they lifted another shell. Men scattered. Shouts rose in panicked waves. Officers ducked for cover, trying to pinpoint where the impossible burst of gunfire had come from. Ward kept firing. He swept the shoreline, disrupting formations, cracking apart their coordinated defense. Sand sprayed upward. Equipment shattered. Bodies fell. For the first time in hours, the beach belonged to an American again, even if only for seconds. The Japanese reacted with terrifying speed. A grenade clattered outside the bunker entrance, skittering across rock. Ward dove behind the sandbag wall as the blast ripped through the corridor, dust and shrapnel raining across the interior. The bunker shook violently. Smoke filled the air, stinging his lungs. He scrambled back to the machine gun and opened fire again, short, controlled bursts, conserving the belt. Sweat dripped into his eyes. His arms ached. But he held steady. On the shoreline, Japanese soldiers began returning fire, dozens of rifles and light machine guns firing toward the bunker slit. Rounds pinged against the stone. Sparks flashed in the darkness. The firing port became a storm of debris and ricochet. Ward ducked low, swung the gun back up, and fired through the gap. He wasn't trying to kill anymore, he was trying to keep them suppressed. Keep them down. Keep them from aiming at the landing craft now creeping closer, silhouettes forming on the horizon. Another rush of boots approached the bunker entrance. Ward grabbed his rifle and fired twice into the narrow passage. A body dropped just outside, blocking part of the doorway. But more were coming. Wind howled through the bunker as if urging him to hold on. Ward slammed another belt into the machine gun, the metal clank echoing through the stone chamber. He fired again, this time targeting the Japanese heavy gun emplacements farther down the shoreline. The first burst struck their ammunition crates, triggering a chain of small detonations that lit the sand in violent flashes. Japanese troops scrambled in chaos. Ward felt something shift in him, something sharp, focused, unwavering. The man who landed trembling on this beach had been burned away, carved out by terror and survival until nothing remained but will. He fired again. And again. His weapon tore through the darkness, its muzzle flash flickering like a heartbeat of defiance. Then another grenade rolled into the bunker. Ward kicked it back toward the entrance. The explosion tore the doorframe apart, sending stone fragments flying. 2 Japanese soldiers were thrown backward by the blast. Ward flinched, ears ringing, head spinning. Blood trickled from inside his ear where the shockwave hit hardest. But he forced himself back up. The machine gun barrel glowed red now. Smoke poured from it, heat radiating like a small furnace. The next burst jammed the weapon, the bolt sticking halfway. He slammed it with the heel of his hand. Nothing. The gun was done. Footsteps again. Close. Too close. Ward grabbed his rifle. He took cover behind the sandbags just as 3 Japanese soldiers charged into the entrance. Their bayonets glinted in the dim light. Ward fired 3 rapid shots, dropping the first 2 instantly. The third lunged forward despite the impacts, driven by desperation. Ward rolled aside as the bayonet stabbed the sand where his chest had been, then drove his shoulder into the man and pinned him against the wall. The struggles weakened. Then stopped. Ward stumbled backward, gasping for breath. His shoulder throbbed. His hands shook. But the sounds outside were shifting. He crawled toward the firing slit. The Japanese troops on the beach were retreating, pulling back, reorganizing, rallying behind the ridge. And beyond them, the first wave of American Marines was now close enough for Ward to see the shapes of the men aboard, rifles ready, helmets low. They were coming. But the Japanese weren't done. Officers near the ridge shouted orders. Reinforcements poured from hidden trenches. They were preparing one final push to retake the shoreline before the Americans touched sand. Ward limped back to the machine gun and tried the bolt again. It didn't budge. Smoke curled from the barrel in thin, dying threads. He glanced at the fallen Japanese bodies outside the bunker entrance and spotted something, a satchel charge, compact, powerful, deadly. Ward grabbed it. He moved outside the bunker, staying low. Japanese soldiers spotted him instantly and opened fire. Bullets chipped stone around him as he ducked behind a ridge. He yanked the fuse cord with his teeth, sprinted forward with every ounce of strength left in him, and hurled the satchel charge into the largest cluster of Japanese troops repositioning near the machine gun line. The explosion tore the ridge open. Bodies and debris surged upward in a thunderous bloom of fire and blackened sand. The shockwave slammed Ward off his feet and sent him rolling down the slope, his helmet skidding across rocks. He lay still for a moment, vision swimming, ears ringing with a deep metallic hum. Then he heard it, the low, rising roar of American landing craft engines drawing up onto the shore. The Japanese attack faltered. Officers shouted for retreat. Men scrambled backward into the hills, abandoning their positions. The path to the beach was open. Ward pushed himself to his knees. He had done it. For 23 minutes, 23 brutal, impossible minutes, he had held the entire beach alone. Not because he was the strongest. Not because he was the bravest. But because he refused to let the men who once underestimated him walk into a slaughter. Marine boots splashed through the surf behind him. Shouts echoed across the beach as they advanced. A corpsman ran to Ward, shouting for help as he dragged him toward cover. Ward tried to speak, but only a rasp escaped. He looked at the ruined ridge, the drifting smoke, the empty bunker that still vibrated with the echo of his defiance. And as his vision dimmed, he realized something with quiet, haunting clarity. No one would ever underestimate him again.